Quick question that might save my student life. I'm animating a shot where my character is interacting with a heavy object, a sword in this case. It's a long and heavy sword, and he's holding it with two hands. What would be the best and most proper way to parent constrain the object and the hands? Should one hand lead the action and the other follow? Or should the sword lead? Should I use locators? If you can go over this topic for a few minutes, we can definitely do that. So in this case, the best thing to do would be to have the sword lead the action. Now, just thinking here. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Just need to grab something. I'll be back in just a second. There you go. I'm unmuted now. Haha! Now everyone can hear me. This is what I grabbed. So, why do I mute myself? I just forget anyway. So, I'm gonna try not to stab anything with this, but I wanted to show this for a very specific point. Point because there's a point on the sword. No, I wanted to show this because of the issue that you're going to have with constraining the sword to the hand. Is the sword or any object like this, it has what we consider hotspots. Hotspots on an object are points that the audience will want to look at. So in this case, holding it here, the hotspots are going to be the cross guard here and the pommel up there. More specifically, it's a point. This is why points, when you point your finger, our eyes go to it, is because as humans, we like to look at things that point in a direction. If I hold this, the tip of this becomes a hot spot, the point there. Our eyes like to look at those, which means that animation-wise, these areas need to be very crisp and clear, very precise. The arcs have to be really nice. And the problem is the longer the object, the harder it is to keep those precise. So for example, if I have, we'll use this here. If I hold it like this, notice how much the pen tip is moving right here. You can see I'm not shaking my hand. This is just me breathing, and I think I've got it, like my arm right on a pulse point. So my arm is actually shaking because of my pulse. And you can see the end of the pencil is moving ever so slightly. That little extra motion gets more amplified the further it goes. So we have this. If I hold this, make sure I don't stab anything, at arm's length here, and it's not going to focus too well, but watch my hand. If I just do a little bit of motion, look at how much that tip of the sword is moving here. But the hand isn't really moving at all. The arm isn't really moving. We're getting all of this extra motion just from that tip of the sword. I can just do a little shake like this and look at how far it's moving. This same concept applies in animation. If you animate the character's hand, you're going to have all the controls on the hand and the wrist, and every little motion you do in there is going to feel good for the hand, but it'll be amplified for the sword. And because the hand, so for example, once again, let's get this here, make sure I don't stab the ceiling. So if I'm holding this here, look at the angle of my wrist. Imagine there was a control curve here. The angle of my wrist is at a 45, whereas the sword is straight up and down. That means all my animation is going to be offset, which is going to be a pain. And any little motion that happens here is going to be amplified all the way up to the tip of the sword. That is a nightmare. Put that down so I don't stab something. Ready for the Night's Watch. Yes, I've got the hair for it. Get my Game of Thronesian hair ready. I just need a fur coat and I'll be good. We did it did snow in Alberta last week, so hey, you never know. We might get some more snow here. Do you like my sword, sword, sword? Oh man, I need to listen to more of those songs. So instead of animating the hand, what we want to do is animate the sword, because the sword is the thing that needs to be super precise. By animating that, we get full control over the object, and it gets to be much easier to clean up the hotspot, which is the tip. The hand, it just stays there. I'm going to use this so I don't stab anything. As I animate the sword going through, the hand just holds on, and I'm good. That's it. So it's easy to just make small adjustments to the hand if you need to, and make sure that your sword is perfect. This also applies to heavy objects. A heavy object has to feel really heavy, and it shouldn't move around too much. If you constrain it to your character, anytime your character just a little adjustment of their shoulders, that's going to move the heavy object, and the heavy object is going to look like it's made out of styrofoam. It'll be like those old Star Trek episodes when they're trying to lift debris off of a character and you can see that it's made out of styrofoam, and they're pretending that it's heavy, and they throw it away and it bounces, literally bounces like styrofoam off to the side. It looks weird. That's what your animation is going to feel like. So let's say we now know that the hands need to follow the sword. How to do that? Well, really, it's not too complex. There are a lot of different constraint setups that you can use. I'll just do a very quick example here of what I would use. And this will work for pretty much any rig. So essentially what we want to do is, let's say this is the handle to the sword, and we want his hand to hold on to the sword. Okay, so take the hand here, and I'll just place it on the handle here. Just get it roughly in place. So something like that. And of course we would want to make sure that the hand is decently posed out. I'm not going to worry about it here. Okay, so we've got the sword, we've got the hand. Well, we could just do a quick constraint, one to the other. So when you're constraining, you always select your object that will lead, then the object that follows. So the sword will lead, then the wrist, and then we're going to go to constrain, parent, and I'm just going to make sure maintain offset is turned on, or else they'll snap together. There we go. Done. That's pretty simple. Now it follows along. I can animate this. All good. The problem with this is a direct constraint like this means that the hand is no longer animatable. If I move this and then rotate the sword right back, that is not good. Because when you're working with a sword, you will notice if you actually hold a sword, your hand moves a lot. So let me pick it up again. There we go. So if I take this sword, watch the grip on the sword here. So as I hold it right here, you can see how the sword is balanced on the thumb pad of my arm here, and there's this big gap at the pinky. As I bring this up without stabbing anything and point it straight up, now it's perfectly straight with my hand. As I tilt it forward, now it's pressed onto the thumb here, and the index finger is being stretched, more like that. As you move your hand across this object, or as this object tilts and everything, your hand is compensating all the time. If you actually look at a reference of people handling weapons, you'll notice that their hands are always adjusting. So, this is very important. We cannot have that hand just locked off, or the whole shot is going to look dead. It's going to feel fake. And where did I get that sword? This one I can't remember. I think we found it at some shop. Like, we were just traveling when we were younger, and we found some sword shop, and we just picked it up. I think it was in the States, maybe. I forget that one exactly. But I saw someone asking which sword is it. That's Excalibur from, I think, one of the movies. So let's actually go in here now, and let's create a proper constraint setup, one where we will be able to animate that wrist as the sword is being animated. The quickest and easiest way to do this is to use one locator. There are more complex setup where we're going to stick with one for now. Now, I'm using a locator, but this can be used with anything. Another piece of geometry, you could use a group, you could use a null object. I like locators because they're visual and they're different from other controls. But really what it is a buffer. So I just want to put that out there. I'm using a locator, but it could be anything. So let's go to create locator right here. So we've got our locator. Let's scale it up. Right there. You'll notice I'm using the local scale right here versus the scale here. The reason for this is so that the controls don't get reset, and I can always quickly reset these to 1 if I need to. You don't have to do that. It's good workflow. So I'm actually going to freeze the transformations here, which your prop should be frozen by default. It basically means that it's all zeroed out. Okay, so we've got a locator. And essentially what this locator is going to do is it's going to act as the new way of controlling the hand. This is going to be the way that we can actually animate the hand. So what I'll do is I'll position the locator where I want it to be on the sword. So usually right in the center. So right around there. And right where he's about to grip it. So probably right around here. Okay. So I've got that locator in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to parent the locator to the object, to the sword. Now, I am doing a parent operation, not a constraint parent. So not going to constrain parent here, go to edit parent. This is a hierarchy operation. Essentially what it's going to do is take the locator right here and then place it. So edit parent, it'll place it into the hierarchy of the cylinder, like so. Essentially what that means is now when I move the sword, the locator moves along with, but since it's part of the hierarchy, I can still animate this wherever I want. So you'll see, still have the ability to animate it. Now, I'll take the hand and constrain it to the locator. So take your object that leads, then the object that follows for a constraint. Go to constrain, I'm going to do a parent constraint right there. Now, when I animate the sword, everything follows because the locator follows the sword and the wrist follows the locator right here. And I can take the locator and animate the hand. And what's really cool about this is because we put it in the center of the sword, if I need the hand to twist around the sword, it acts like a pivot point right there. So I can actually twist it around the handle there. So with this, I can now reposition the hand, maybe move it up a little bit more on the handle, and voila. So if the sword is now going to be like he's holding it out here and we know that the hand has to be more of a kind of 90-degree angle, boop, right there, done, and everything still follows along. Done. That's the easiest way. Now, if you're doing a more complex setup, you can essentially use more locators to give yourself ways of offsetting things, of moving things around, but this would be the base level. And if you want, we could do another demo later on how to go to like level 2 of this. Now, why don't you use the ball at the front of the hand? You mean this one over here? The ball at the front of the hand here, this is the global arm control. So this controls the length of the hand, or the scale of the hand, I should say, the length of the arms. So how long the arm is. It also has some of the master hand controls here. So you could pose out the hand quickly there. But yeah. Now, if you're talking about constraining, that's a really good point. So you'll notice that I constrained the object, the locator, to the IK wrist here. Or sorry, I constrained the IK wrist to the thing. This is good because IK wrists, that's what you need to use in order to have a hand follow an object. If you try to constrain an FK control to something, it's going to break. It's just going to break. You don't want to constrain an FK control to something. Now, this actually brings up a good point. What if we wanted to do the opposite situation? And you'll use this situation, or this in situations where, let's say I have this object here in my hand, right there, and it's really in my hand. Well, at this point, is this a hotspot? Is this going to stick out to the audience as some weird thing that we'll focus on? No, it's in my hand. The hotspots are my fingers, my knuckles. So if I have this, like let's say a baseball, I don't need to animate the object. I could just animate the hand because it's basically like animating a hand here. Just now there's an object in it. So I could constrain the object to the hand. Okay, great. How would we approach that? Well, it's the same setup. So let's take a sphere. Let's say, oops, that's a cube. Let's say we have a sphere here and we want this character to hold a baseball. So maybe he has a baseball bat and a baseball. So the object can be constrained directly to the hand. And this will work in FK or IK. So I'll use it in FK for now. We'll put this into his palm. And once again, how do I constrain it? Well, I don't want to constrain it directly because I'm not going to be able to animate the ball. So if I had this object in my hand, I wouldn't be able to do this where I'm moving it around, I'm tumbling it in my hand, I'm rotating it. It would be glued to my hand. That's not good. So we need a locator. So the way I can do this is, once again, create a locator. You could also use groups and other things. Again, this is my preference is locators. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up with the object in this case, because it'll give me a new pivot point. So I can take the locator, then the object, go to modify, match transformations, and you'll see that the locator now snaps over there. Perfect. It's right in the center of the sphere. And let's see, I can do this both ways. So I could either constrain the locator the sphere to the locator, or I could constrain the locator to the hand. I'm just trying to think which one would be more fun. Let's do it this way. So imagining that this could be a more complex prop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sphere and I'm going to constrain it to the locator. So locator, then sphere, constrain parent, right there. Now the locator is controlling the object. And I'm going to parent the locator to the hand. So take the locator, then the hand, the child, then the parent, and then hit P. And now where I move the hand, it goes along. Great. But I did something wrong here. And this is very important. It's a very important distinction between constraining something to someone's hand and a hand to something else. What I did is I connected the locator directly to the control curve here. In this case, it's the FK control. What that means is that if I move the arm while it's in FK, everything works. Great, perfect. I'm good for my animation. Start animating all the good stuff. Oh shoot, I need a section where the hand is in IK. Well, let's just switch. Doesn't work. Because it's still connected to the FK control, not the IK control. When you are connecting something to someone's hand, do not connect it to the control of the hand, because that can switch FK or IK. That's going to break your animation if ever you have to do a switch, and then you have to make another connection. It's a pain. So instead, let's undo. There we go. What you want to do is connect your locator to an arm control, or to the joint itself, the actual skeleton of the character. So for this rig, there is an arm control here, and you'll notice the pivot point is actually at the wrist. If I connect the locator to this, so I'll just parent it there. Now in FK, it works fine. switch to IK, still works fine. So just something to keep in mind. Whenever you're connecting something to someone's hand, never connect it to the wrist control, whether it's FK or IK. Try to connect it to an arm control, something that'll be universal between FK or IK. When you connect the hand to something, it's always going to be the IK control to the object, because the IK control is what has to follow, not the FK. Hopefully that all makes sense. So yeah, and if you want, again, if you want to see a more complex, like version 2 of this, let me know. I would stick with this for now, kind of practice with this. Once you get the hang of this, we can go to like level 2. And level 2 gives you a lot of really cool things. So the big thing is that you want to make sure you understand the basics first, because it's really just using the basics and adding more steps. So yeah, hopefully that helps. See, I constrained to that in my juggler so it wasn't limiting. Nice. Yeah, so that ball there, if ever, like I said, if ever you're constraining something to the hand, always to the arm control or a joint. Let's see. Now, just catching up with the chat here because I did miss some questions. And if anyone else has other questions, I know we're supposed to be looking at Castlevania animation, but these streams are all about your questions and helping you guys, so that's the priority here. Let's see. So if you're animating a ball, you'd add a bone so it wouldn't be a rig. No, so what you can do is, let's say you don't have this sphere here. Your rig doesn't have an arm control or any universal control that is like right at that joint there. What I would end up doing is I would take my rig, make sure I can see the skeleton. So for this rig, I will turn on skeleton visibility, and I would constrain or connect the object right to the wrist joint, the actual bone of the character. And this way, regardless of where the character moves, it's going to be connected there. Again, and regardless of if it's FK or IK. So that's the big thing. I personally try to do this as kind of the last resort if the rig doesn't have it, like a control, like an arm control here. But if it doesn't, it's not a bad thing to connect something straight to the bone. Let's see. How do you set up the second hand to follow the handle sword as well? So you would just constrain the hand to the sword this exact same way. Same thing. So another locator, constrain. So you have the sword handle, you constrain the first hand with a locator. Second hand, put a locator lower down on the handle, same thing, same setup. And they're not going to conflict with each other. They're just going to follow the sword handle. And if they start to intertwine, use the locators to readjust the hand poses so that they actually work and don't like twist in weird ways.